Hi, and thank you for visiting my channel. For more information, kindly subscribe and follow. Now let's get started.
Roman Reigns was the Universal Champion for 4 years, and during that time, he changed the business. Reigns is still seen as the face of the company despite not being champion for almost a year, so he likely took offense to not being offered a role by The Rock. The final boss showed up on SmackDown to make an offer to Cody Rhodes to become the corporate champion, something that he could have offered Reigns last year or even offered him now since he believes he will win back his title at some point. This offer could cause some serious issues between Roman Reigns and The Rock after the two men were on the same page back in January. The final boss acknowledged Reigns by placing the Ula Fala around his neck after he won the tribal combat match. Reigns wasn't in attendance for SmackDown, but it will be interesting to see how he reacts to the news that Rhodes has been offered this position while he was on hiatus after being injured by Seth Rollins. It's unclear if Roman Reigns will be in attendance for Elimination Chamber. But the likelihood is that if he is, he could crash the promo between The Rock and Rhodes and make it clear he's not behind this new direction for his Bloodline member. Will Roman Reigns vs. The Rock begin to build from here? The Tribal Chief and The Rock are expected to go one-on-one at WrestleMania at some point, and a feud could likely start in the coming weeks and then build over the next year. Reigns is a face now, so he wouldn't have accepted the role if it was offered, but he would have liked to have been offered it by his own family. If Reigns is hurt by The Rock's decision, then he could shun him from his family, which would lead to much bigger issues between the two men in the future. The whispers had begun circulating through the WWE universe. The Tribal Chief, Roman Reigns, was not happy. And when Roman wasn't happy, there was always a storm brewing. Over the past few months, Reigns had taken a back seat, allowing his family, Solo Sikoa, Jimmy Uso, and the newest addition, Jacob Fatu, to steer the bloodline. But what should have been a smooth transition in his absence had turned into something far worse. Roman Reigns had been ignored. And Roman Reigns did not tolerate being ignored. The king without a throne. Roman had sacrificed everything for his family. He built the bloodline into an empire, a dynasty that ruled WWE for years. When he left after WrestleMania, it was under the belief that his family would continue to honor the foundation he built. But instead of upholding his legacy, Solo Sikoa had taken the reins, whispering in the ears of Jimmy Uso and Jacob Fatu. The entire faction had started making decisions without even consulting Roman. At first, Reigns had brushed it off. He thought maybe they were giving him space, respecting his time away. But as weeks turned into months, the texts slowed down. Calls went unanswered. SmackDown aired every Friday, yet he wasn't even mentioned. There was no tribute, no reverence. It was as if he had never existed. Then came the final insult. At a recent SmackDown, the Bloodline had been in the ring, and Paul Heyman, the wise man himself, had hesitated before referring to Solo Sikoa as the new head of the table. That hesitation had said it all. Heyman knew Roman Reigns was still the rightful ruler. But Solo had smiled, letting the moment linger, and neither Jimmy nor Jacob had corrected it. They had cast him aside. A long-awaited return. The silence ended when Roman Reigns walked into the WWE Performance Center unannounced. He didn't travel with his usual entourage. There were no security guards, no Paul Heyman by his side. It was just him, the way it was in the beginning. As he entered the building, a few young wrestlers and staff members froze. The sight of the most dominant champion in WWE history sent a wave of tension through the room. He ignored their stares and headed straight to the Bloodline's private locker room. When he opened the door, Solo Sikoa was sitting in the center, flanked by Jimmy and Jacob. Paul Heyman, looking nervous as ever, was standing nearby, clutching his phone. The atmosphere turned suffocatingly tense. Tribal Chief, Heyman started, but Roman held up a hand. "Am I?" Reigns asked, his voice cold. "Because from what I've seen, I don't exist to any of you anymore." Solo remained seated, his expression unreadable. Jimmy looked uneasy. Jacob crossed his arms. "You've been gone for months, Jimmy finally spoke. We had to keep things moving. Moving? Roman scoffed. Moving where, exactly? You've been losing matches left and right. You've been fighting battles you weren't ready for. And worst of all, his eyes locked onto Solo. You let people start thinking you were me. Solo, calm as ever, leaned forward. I never said I was you. But you never corrected them either, Roman shot back. A long silence filled the room. Paul Heyman looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock. Jimmy nervously shifted in his seat. Jacob Fatu, new to all this but powerful in his own right, simply watched the exchange unfold. Then, Roman shook his head. I gave everything for this family. I put my body on the line. I took on every challenger, every enemy, so you didn't have to. And how do you repay me? You ignore me. You push me aside like I was never here. His voice grew sharper. I don't tolerate betrayal. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but Roman wasn't done. I was willing to guide you. I was willing to come back and take back what's mine. But now? He took a deep breath and looked around the room, taking in each of their faces. Now, I don't need to. You've already destroyed the bloodline without me. The ultimate betrayal. Roman turned to Paul Heyman. You've been by my side for years, wise man. But the moment I step away, you let them start rewriting history? You let them erase me? Heyman stammered, his usual smooth talk failing him. My tribal chief, Roman shook his head in disappointment. You're not my wise man anymore. Those words visibly crushed Heyman. His hands trembled as he clutched his phone tighter. But Roman didn't care. He turned back to Solo, Jimmy, and Jacob. I gave you everything, and in return, you treated me like an afterthought. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. So now? You're dead to me. Jimmy's eyes widened. Yus, come on. It ain't like that. Roman's stare hardened. No, Jimmy. It's exactly like that. Without another word, Roman turned and walked out of the room. A new era, a new path. As Roman left the performance center, something inside him shifted. The bloodline was no longer his concern. He had given them everything, and they had chosen to move forward without him. Fine. He would carve out a new path, one without them. No longer burdened by carrying a dynasty, no longer responsible for their failures. He was still Roman Reigns. He was still the most dominant force WWE had ever seen. And if they thought the bloodline was strong without him, they hadn't seen anything yet. SmackDown was about to witness something even more terrifying than the tribal chief's dominance. The wrath of a king who had been betrayed.